Hi everyone. This time my guest is Mr. Fons Trompenaars. Fons is one of the most influential management thinkers in business world. He is the author of the book Riding the Waves of Culture, and that book inspired me a lot. In this short talk, Fons shared a lot of his experiences, his multicultural childhood, servant leadership, Danish, Dutch, and Indian culture shocks, and a lot more. This is going to be really interesting. And Fons is an amazing guy and a great friend. Let's go to the interview. Let's start.
Good.
Okay, so I'm so happy to talk to you, Fons, after a long time. So let's start with something about your childhood. I know you have a French mom and a Dutch dad, right? So how was your childhood?
That's a very intriguing question. First of all, a very happy one. A very
Yeah.
happy. Lovely mother, wonderful father. But my experience was that the logics of both families
Yeah.
that were taken seriously on both sides were completely different. Although both Catholic, Christian, Catholic, but even the experience of religion was different between the more Protestant Dutch and the more Catholic French. Even Catholicism was more Protestant in the Netherlands, namely, my father felt guilty very often when he didn't go to church. My mother always said, God will understand, right? Now, also, what was remarkable is the respect for authority in France. And we, as little children going to Paris, it was taisez-vous, shut up, because the parents are talking to the grandparents. And so children shut up. In the Netherlands, it was almost the opposite. It was shut up, but it was the grandchildren telling to the grandparents, right? Exaggerating, obviously, but the respect for authority and for age was so much more developed in France than in the Netherlands, where from being a youngster up, you are educated to challenge authority. And Jinu, I wanted just to say that the beauty of this is I love both families. Not one is better than the other. So my childhood was not trying, you just live your life. It's not trying to understand both sides, but you felt both sides are okay.
That's good. That's good. Because that was my question. Do you feel more French or more Dutch?
No, I have an answer to that. If I'm in France, I'll feel very Dutch. And when I'm in the Netherlands, I feel very French. It's at the end you meld it together and you just yourself. Yeah.
Okay, nice. How did you become interested in the field of intercultural?
There is a practical reason, a cognitive reason, and I think the main reason is what we just discussed.
Okay.
Being brought up in a multicultural environment. Then when I finished my business economics degree, which is, I was 22, 23, I felt a bit too young. Can you imagine? I felt a bit too young to immediately go to work. 9 to 5, are you kidding? So a professor of mine, where I wrote my thesis, he said, Fons, there is a scholarship available for 1 year to do a PhD in America. And then you have to come back to a Dutch university and you go on. And why I'm saying it, because there was the European Institute of Advanced Studies in Management that was in Brussels that selected people for going out for a year.
Okay.
And I was interviewed by a very unknown person, Geert Hofstede. I was invited by Laurent, which is a professor at INSEAD, Giorgio Inzarelli, Gunnar Hedlund, they were all professors who were there, let's say, for half a year. And part of their responsibility is to select a student, send them out to America with the money of, in this case, the Dutch government.
Yeah.
And I got the scholarship, but it was Hofstede who gave me a pile of his articles. This, by the way, was in 1978.
Oh, okay.
It was the topic was unknown,
Mm.
and I got the scholarship, but the two merged. You know, the input of Hofstede about culture got me excited,
Yeah.
and on the other hand, my upbringing said this is the place to be.
Yeah. Good. How do you compare Dutch culture with Indian culture?
No, let's you know, we use 7 dimensions. I would almost say that on every dimension we're the opposite. So I think the Dutch are more rule oriented, and a rule is there to be obeyed to, while the let's say Indian culture, although I think you have as many cultures as languages.
That's true. That's true.
But still, compared to the Dutch, you say no, there is a rule, but let's make an exception, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's one. I think you are more group oriented. The Dutch are more individualistic. But be careful. I think your groups are very often defined by class, religion. And when we have groups in the Netherlands, it's of another nature. It was religious, by the way. We had what we call in the Netherlands the pillars.
Yeah.
Even within one pillar, the Protestants, we had 5 sub-pillars. Catholics was more those who really believed and those who troubled a bit anyway. But we are more individualistic from the outset. Perhaps on the dimension of expressing emotions, we're not so far apart. We're a bit in the middle both.
Yeah,
we're not as extreme as the Latins, but we're not as, let's say, what we call neutral in our dimension as the Finns or the English. Yeah. We are very specific. You're much more diffuse. You know, Hinduism, much broader. So you need a lot of gods. Yeah. If we believe it's at least one. And we are more specific, and that shows in the way we communicate. You're more high context, we're more low context. We are known in the world as being blunt, direct, therefore very often seen as impolite. In that sense, I think the Danes are close.
Yeah.
The Danes are close. You're more for the big picture. And that's why you include context, right?
That's true. That's true. Need a context. Yeah.
Another big difference is our 5th dimension, achievement versus ascription. In other words, is your authority based on what you do or who you are? I think in India, you're much more basing your authority on who you are, the family you come from, the religion you practice, the blah, 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 blah. Well, in the Netherlands, is cut the crap. What are you doing? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I'm not trying to be judgmental in whatever case. And then in time orientation, I think we're more midterm oriented, while in India you're either very short term oriented to survive, or long term when you have the wisdom.
Yeah, exactly.
And finally, I think we have a locus of internal control. We want to control our environment, while in India it's more go with the flow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
It's important.
Right. Now, I think that's a bit my first view on the differences. And by the way, for your information, we have on our website a easily accessible, it's called Culture Explore. with an X in the middle, where you can get, you type in the Netherlands, you
Okay.
type, or Denmark, you type in India, and you get the scores. And I didn't prepare in that way, but you get the scores plus what it entails.
Oh, okay.
But it's always a nice little thing that people love to access, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, for you as one of the most important consultants in this field, use it in the background. You know, you can easily access it. It's about 140 countries. It's really a lot of stuff.
And since you talked about Denmark, so how do you see Danish culture? How it's different from Dutch?
The Danish are very simple. It's tall, blonde, with a glass of beer in their hand. No, I got this by a Dane who told me, Fons, don't make it too complex. We're long, we're blonde, and we have a beer in our hand. No, I think the Danes are perhaps the closest in the world to the Dutch. So what I just explained is very Danish. Now, there are some differences. I think we are a bit more direct. We have less respect for authority, even compared to the Danes. I think we are more open for confrontation in the Netherlands than the Danes.
Yeah.
But it's relative. But for the rest, I mean, the best football players, as you know, it's the most important side business that there is. But we had a lot of good playing Danes in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But now many stayed in the Netherlands because they married a Dutch person or not. The fluency in Dutch is amazing. You hear them on television, and you can't, if you didn't know that they were from Denmark.
Oh, okay.
Really amazing. So, in other words, they like the Dutch, they like to speak more languages, but they're all also open to learn a lot. Because we're a small country, compared to India, we're nothing. We're nothing. And
Very
even
small.
the Danes, even less than the Dutch.
Yeah. Another interesting factor is that the Danish humor or Danish sarcasm, and many of the expats say it's very hard to understand the Danish humor sarcasm. How is it in Dutch, Netherlands?
Yeah. Now, obviously, word plays are always difficult because they don't translate. But first of all, the role of humor is very often in a certain moment. We try to be specific. I remember when I was young.
Yeah.
I loved. I'll tell you why I love jokes. But I have a friend and me. We, in the middle of the party, got people around us listening to the latest jokes. But that was on a party. You feel that if you are in a serious workshop, you have to be careful. Because jokes are for a certain moment and not to do when it's serious, right? And I think with the Danes, it's the same. Now, then there is obviously the cultural nature of a joke. And very often, I don't get Danish jokes either. They're very local, you know. Let me give you the last one I heard. I heard it from a Norwegian. Now, I don't know if this in Scandinavia is known as the joke that they tell about each other. But it's a Norwegian telling me that why in Denmark do they have the door still not completely closed when they go to the toilet? And they said, because the Danes want to check if you don't peep through the keyhole.
Oh my God.
Now, it's an interesting one because very often big countries make jokes of smaller countries. So the British about the Irish, the Dutch about the Belgians, or the French about the Belgians. In fact, everybody about the Belgians. It's very often things that happen. But I was telling you why I like humor, because I once had the great privilege to work with John Cleese. John Cleese, you might know the name, Fawlty Towers, The Life of Brian, and he, he followed me in one of my keynotes, and we were on a train to another venue, and we had 1.5 hours together. He says, Fons, why I like your work on cultural differences, but especially dilemma reconciliation, and how to bring together the differences, is the essence of humor. He says, humor is when two opposite logics both turn logical, and it makes you cry. And it makes you cry for laughter, right?
Yeah.
And the example he gave, 4 prisoners were playing cards.
Okay.
One was cheating, so they kicked him out of jail. Yeah. But it's interesting. If you respect cultural differences, it becomes a dilemma. And humor is one way of bringing opposites together. And that's why I'm so worried that nowadays, with the woke culture, there is no place for humor anymore. Everybody is worried about, have you? While good humor is obviously not at the cost of somebody, but it's showing that the relativity of your own position. Right?
Okay, good, interesting. I also talk with many of my friends in Scandinavia, and they also talk like it's our favorite pastime to humor each other, like the Danes or
teasing each
Norwegian.
other.
It's a favorite pastime.
No, but that's very true for the Dutch as well.
Okay.
And you might not appreciate it. I mean, you in India, because you don't hurt each other. But hurting each other in a nice way is a sign of affection.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I've been told, I live with the Danish family, and they told me we are trying sarcasm with you because we like you.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Why would we trouble ourselves to hurt you if we don't love you?
Exactly. Good.
Yeah.
Could you share something about your relationship with Charles Turner?
Sure. Let me start with the origin. I did my PhD by comparing 10 refineries of Shell and looking at what is the effect of national culture on organizational culture. This was between 79 and 82.
Okay.
Then I joined Shell. And by the way, an interesting little bridge to my first day of work is the recruitment process, because they separated my PhD from the recruitment. And I'll tell you why. Because I was ready, to brag about my PhD, and I went to Wharton and blah, blah, blah. No interest. They said, Mr. Trompenaars, first question, how mobile are you?
Oh.
I said, what do you mean? Now, if we send you out to another country, are you willing to do so? Because in Shell, mobility is crucial. Okay. Every 3 years, you go to another country, right? Second question, Mr. Trompenaars, how mobile is your wife? I said, very mobile, New York, Paris. No, we mean Nigeria. We mean Oman. We mean, And I said, I'll come back to you with the answer. By the way, I knew the answer. It was no way. Fons, good luck with your career. Anyway, despite all this, I was hired. And my first day at work, the head of group planning. Now, planning was a big thing in Shell, scenario planning. And the guy in the Netherlands, Jaap Leemhuis, said, Fons, have you read this article by Charles Hamden Turner, who writes about cultural differences between East and West. It was called A Tale of Two Paradigms.
Okay.
And on a very high level of abstraction, West versus East.
Okay.
And it didn't only summarize my PhD, but went much further.
Oh.
Yeah. And where did it go further? It had this chapter on reconciling the differences.
Okay.
And I met Charles, and let me tell you another anecdote on the phone, because he was in London, I was in Rotterdam. And Charles said, Fons, I read your thesis, so I think we can work together. I said, oh,
Wow.
tell me more. Yeah, I reconciled all your dilemmas. I said, what the hell is he saying? And I said, but what do you mean? He said, no, I was afraid, he said, you were another Dutchman to put the world on bipolar scales. Yeah, that's what I did. He said, yeah, but Fons, I see you are a bit confused. So let me explain. One of your dimensions is individual versus collective, right?
Yeah.
If you are an individualist at the cost of the community, you're an egoist and it doesn't work. If you're a collectivist at the cost of the individual, you're a communist and it doesn't work. So if both ends of your scale don't work, why don't you try to combine them? And that took me quite some time to really understand the depth, which is more Indian than Dutch, right?
Yeah, that's true.
He says great individuals are great because they give it back to society.
Exactly.
And great societies nurture individual excellence.
Yeah.
That's why Denmark and India, you combine the two, you're in heaven.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Now, then we started working together. Another anecdote about Charles. I wrote my first book, Running the Waves of Culture, alone.
Okay.
My publisher, at the time it was The Economist Books, said, Miss Trompenaars, wonderful, great stuff, but two things. Your English is lousy, and as you can hear, it hasn't improved a lot. And secondly, we need more anecdotes. It's very academic. 100 anecdotes. Now there were 20 in it, but another 80.
Yeah.
By the way, that was easy because your mindset is like an anecdote.
Yeah.
You keep on, every, like even our call.
Exactly.
An anecdote, right?
Yeah.
Now, then there was the second thing is, do you have a ghostwriter that could help you to make better English? And I knew Charles, so I said, Charles, could you? He rewrote all my text, but respecting every word.
Okay.
And that's why in the second edition of the book, because even the first edition that was rewritten by Charles, the publisher said, no, it's your book, Fons, only your name.
Okay.
I felt, Charles, when you write as beautiful English as Charles, you cannot ignore him. So now we became real partners. We wrote a lot of books together. And by the way, Charles is now 89. His mind is still amazing. His body is not so good anymore, but an amazing guy. Not only a big brain, but a big heart.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Servant leadership.
Yes.
Could you give some insights on that?
Oh, yeah. No, we were looking because more and more clients were coming to us and said, Mr. Trompenaars, culture is created by leadership. You're a culture guy, but could you tell us a bit more what type of leader? And it's interesting because in the past, leaders in America were leading Americans. In Japan, were leading Japanese. In the Netherlands, were leading Dutch people, right? Danish, if you like. But nowadays, all the teams become multicultural.
Yeah.
And the Dutch leadership style in a multicultural environment doesn't work.
For sure, yeah.
News for you, neither the American, neither the Japanese.
Yeah.
So we were looking, but what is a philosophy of leadership that works in diverse environments? And the only one I could find, at least, but stimulated by other people, was servant leadership.
Yeah.
Because the icons of servant leadership is not Trump, but it is Mandela.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not Putin, but it is Gandhi.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
The icons of religion, from Mohammed to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
In Hinduism, it's a bit difficult because there are many gods, but they are all servant leaders.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if the icons of religion covering billions of people, and the icons of people we all like Mandela, Gandhi, then what do they have in common? And that's the definition of Greenleaf, is that servant leadership is enabling others to perform better. And it's very simple, because a good father and a good mother does that with the children. You're there for the kids. You're not there for yourself, right? Now, that's a bit my summary about servant leadership. And what we're doing quite some work now with organizations to, we have a whole training on servant leadership that becomes very practical, which is fun.
Could you share some of your cultural shocks that you expect? That would be interesting.
Yeah. I only have ones when I went to India.
Here we go.
No, you want to have some culture shocks.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, first of all, the culture shock when I went to America. But I mean with culture shock not only the negative, also the positive.
Exactly. Yeah.
That I was, culture shock very often means that what you think is normal is not.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's an enormous learning cycle you go through. And in America, what I found was wonderful is the ease in which people got into contact.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the negative side of it is the ease in which they disconnected as well. Yeah. It's a bit like marriage. Yeah, you marriage within a month and you divorce 2 years later, right?
Yeah.
But I'm obviously exaggerating because it might be 3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
But the beauty is you immediately feel at home. People are very helpful, and that was a culture shock for me in America. Another one very often relates to food and drinks. In America, the enormous plates you get.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who doesn't want to spoil anything, so you eat it and you grow and you grow. And while in other cultures you get very little. Now these are, culture shock is perhaps a big deal, but also what I'm not only in America, but in other countries where I've lived. But even the 3 months we always went to France, because I was born and raised in the Netherlands, but because of my French background, we went to France. There are culture shocks there too, namely, how do you treat the policeman? In the Netherlands, you speed, you're stopped. The first thing the policeman does is take off the cap and introduces himself with his name.
Okay.
So when I got a ticket in France, now in America, I'll come back to the police there.
Yeah.
In France, I said, can't you take off your cap?
Oh my God.
And introduce yourself properly. Now, my French is quite fluent. It's quite fluid because I was halfly raised by my mother in French because she was very bad in Dutch anyway. But cutting a long story short, I was almost handcuffed.
Hmm.
Uh, by the way, in the Netherlands, you still get your ticket. That's not
Okay.
the point. That's not the
Hmm.
point.
Okay.
But it's let's be equal.
Ah.
France, let's even make the distance bigger.
Okay.
You shut up, you speed it, and
Hmm.
I'm the police, so
Okay.
don't mess with me. Now in America, it becomes almost physical. I was
Oh
dragged out of a car.
my God.
I had to put my hands on the back,
Wow.
and then they realized I had to laugh. Do you have your driver's license? I only had the Dutch one, which is okay. So I gave him the Dutch one. Then he went back to the car, and he said, after 5 minutes, because they obviously couldn't
Yeah.
cipher it, he went back to me and he says, "Let this be a warning."
Oh my God.
But anyway, that's something that authority. For me, the Dutch shock is very often a shock caused by the extreme certain characteristics of the Dutch.
Yeah.
So let me give you, so authority is equal in the Netherlands, regardless of your role, even the boss, right?
Yeah.
While in France, America, it's much bigger.
Yeah.
India as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The hierarchy.
And so the culture shock is very often about authority issues.
Yeah.
But also about the way people communicate. So my culture shock was very often with the English, always say, this is an interesting idea. And in the beginning, I thought they meant interesting. Yeah. They add to it, it's an interesting idea. It has potential. It's a crappy idea.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of culture shocks in the way, in France, it was more like, but why don't you tell me the truth? You are lying. You could see they were lying, right?
Yeah.
And in France, that's called. Now, let me give you an example. I was in France, and for a client, and we had a project, and the project leader of the company was a French guy.
Okay.
I was talking to a colleague on the corridor, and I said, "What do you think of the project?" He said, "I don't think it's going very well." I said, "What do you think is the cause?" And he said, "Yeah, our boss, the project leader, is so stupid and not managing this well." And okay, we come to the meeting. The boss is there. The guy is sitting next to me, and the guy was asked by the boss, "So, DJ, what do you think of the project?" "Oh, it's going pretty well. Obviously, we need to work on some aspects, but no, I think we're making progress." And I'm saying, but this guy's lying. Yeah. The French call this intelligence. Yeah. By the way, this little mini culture shock is I very often use to explain low and high context cultures. The French are high context. In other words, when the boss is there, you communicate differently than when the boss is not there because the context has changed, right?
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, those are my. So, to be honest, the biggest culture shock is on this level, which is not very big for me.
Yeah.
What I notice in every culture shock, that you're starting to miss things of your own country that you never missed when you were there.
Yeah.
Like licorice and herring. No, I like herring, I like licorice.
Yeah.
But to really miss it was not something I felt when I was home. So very often in the culture shock stage at the bottom, you start missing things that you never thought you would be missing in life, right? It's an interesting one.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Fons. have the small talks. In many cultures, India, it's important to have some small talks before we get into business, which is not very true when it comes to German, Dutch, Denmark. Because for cultures like Asia, we need to build trust by having some small talks.
Yeah. Now we use what we call the 4 R's.
Okay.
The first R to solve this problem is recognition. First of all, be aware of it, right? The fact that you say, hey, in India we have small talk. How's your family doing? How's your health? Did you watch the cricket game?
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't it exciting? And we in the Netherlands say, hey, cut the crap. When is the meeting starting? I need to. The second R is respect. Recognition, respect. To have small talk is not better or worse than going straight to the point.
Yeah.
It has to do, by the way, with specific and diffuse. We, Dutch, Danish, are specific. Meeting, be specific. Diffuse is the bigger picture. We need to create context. Small talk is part of that. The relationship, the human being. We say, cut the human being, who cares? The business. I'm exaggerating on purpose. So the third level is reconciliation. So recognition, respect, then reconciliation. Now, let's try this together. The essential question in the dilemma between straight to the point, small talk, is how can small talk help you to get even straighter to the point? And how can being straight to the point help you to have small talk? Okay? Now that is challenging.
Yeah.
Because normally we say, it's either this or it's that, right? The Jan Carlsen, unfortunately, he was a Swede, not a Dane, had moments of truth. Now, what is a moment of truth? It is specifically defining when to go deep.
Okay.
So what you could do, you could, in the beginning of the meeting, specify an agenda item. Now, let's not call it small talk. But you are straight to the point about small talk.
That's a nice one. Yeah.
And you say only 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But we will have a moment specifically defined to go diffuse.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now I'm giving that as an example. I'm trying to be improvising what it is, what you could do, namely combining both cultures. If the Danes want to be specific, it's like an agenda. Point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. While you in India start with 4, then go back to 2, then over the way 3, so that is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, would you perhaps see in India where you go straight to the point, and very often, let me give you another example, because very often what people do in Denmark, in another form or shape you can find in India, and vice versa.
Yeah.
The example I give is the role of a contract, right? In Denmark, the Netherlands, they might say, I trust Jinu. You know why? He signed the contract. I can fully trust him now. And Jinu is saying, I really don't trust these Danes because the first thing they ask me is to sign a contract. Don't they trust me, right? Now, let me tell you the real story. I was doing work for McDonald's, and McDonald's was opening what they call restaurant in Beijing in China. And it was a booming success. Then they wanted to open 3 other ones.
Oh, okay.
The CEO, an American in Beijing, said, Fons, I need your help because I have a problem. Headquarters will only build those 3 new restaurants if the Chinese sign a contract.
Hmm.
I know that if I ask them to sign a contract, it's a sign that I don't trust them. While in America, it's the opposite.
Hmm.
Now, I can tell you how we solved this, namely, and that was, but in America, and because headquarters is in America, they have a legal department, said we will never invest if we don't have a contract, right?
Yeah, yeah.
While in China, you get the contract, but let's start with the building.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what we did is the metaphor. I said, in America, can you find a place, an instant, a process where you have the same, namely the dilemma is, do you go for the rule and then work on the relationship? Or do you work first on the relationship and then the rule?
Yeah.
I said, in America, do you first marry and then work on the relationship? Or do you first work on the relationship and then say, let's celebrate this by a marriage?
Wonderful. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, now that's Chinese. So what they did, they sent the CEO to celebrate the relationship. And as part of the celebration, they jointly signed the contract.
Excellent. That's
Right?
it. Yeah.
So you could do that as a metaphor to India and Denmark.
Exactly. Yeah. What is the fourth R, Fons?
Oh, the fourth house is realization. In
Yeah.
fact, the example I gave
Yeah.
is how do you do it?
Yeah, exactly. What is the future of intercultural training field?
I love this question. I love this question. Now, it has been the future already for a long time. I feel personally, Jinu, and correct me if I'm wrong because we're in the same business, is that a lot of people in intercultural management explain the differences, good or bad, but they explain the differences. Right? And then they go out of the room and say, good luck. We say, listen, the differences are an intermediate step to do something with the difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we call that dilemma reconciliation, duality management, whatever you want to call it, right? And I think the future should be more in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And it has good reasons. Because, you know, I remember 30 years ago when I really was in the big beginning of my career in multicultural management or intercultural, however you want to call it. And there was a group of a Dutch family that you prepared for going to Delhi. So you tell a bit about Indian culture, you tell a bit about Dutch culture, blah, 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 blah. Now, if you go to Delhi, you might have a team that consists of 2 people from India, 1 American, 3 Nigerians, right, and a South African. Now, what are you preparing them for? And what we found is that nowadays you need to prepare people for the dilemmas that are created because of the diversity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and what are those dilemmas? Now some people in the room think a leader should give directions, orders, and others think, no, they have to listen to me, right? Top down, bottom up. What do you do? And so the role of our field becomes much more, what do you do with the issues at the table, rather than just putting people into the Indian box, the Danish box.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is still important, but as an intermediate step, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second point is that we now get a diversity of diversity. If you have a young Indian female talking to an old Dutch male, what is causing the problem? being Indian or Dutch, young or old, male or female.
Mm.
So my advice would be, in our field, let's start with the problem, the issue on the
Yeah.
table, and let's then look how culture has an effect
On it, exactly. Yeah.
on the issue, and then do dilemma reconciliation, respect those differences, and do something together.
Exactly. Wonderful.
Good, good.
Thanks, Fons. I think we met in Bangalore in 2020.
Yes.
When are you coming? When are you coming again?
Thank you for the invitation. I'll be on the plane tomorrow. No, there is nothing planned, but I love the environment, and I've been to many places. I've been to Delhi. I was impressed also by Delhi. I mean, not only by the beauty of certain parts, but also by the amount of noise that the cars make. 75%. So what the Dutch do with their mouths, you do with your cars. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Nice. So thanks a lot, Fons, for this short talk with me. I'm really happy, and thank you so much. And we will meet again in India or maybe Amsterdam someday.
Very good. I'll love it, and thank you for the time with you. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Fons. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
Jinu. I'll send you all.
Yeah.